2, the cross-impact of climate change in education, a global challenge. Bienvenue, messieurs, mesdames, à la conférence internationale d'Educate BA 2022, l'impact croisé.
So welcome to this conference about the cross-impact of climate change and education. It is a world challenge, as you will know.
Is the Belgian platform for education and training within the development cooperation. And there are 53 members that are member of the platform. So that's one of the things that you will notice. There were many, many people here from the platforms. Now, a couple of things that I would like to share with you before we really start getting into it. My name is Ruben, and I will be moderating all this today and tomorrow. For online participants, but also for people in the room, the people in the room have a headset, and online participants, they have a button where they can change languages because there is simultaneous translation. Pour les gens à la maison et pour les gens dans la salle aussi, il y a de l'interprétation simultanée. Donc, c'est-à-dire, vous pouvez changer sur l'écran, vous pouvez appuyer sur le bouton.
The speaker does simply, or the moderator does simply repeat what he said just before about the practicalities, i.e. the fact that you do need to click on the globe if you want to have access to the interpretation.
We finally can gather here physically. And you already see immediately that the pace physically is different than when you're online. People are still coming in, but we are not going to wait for them because online we have people sitting behind their desk wondering why we are 5 minutes late. So that's why we are now here already starting, whereas I see many people still coming in. But it's also great to be able to do this in a hybrid way, because that's something we haven't done. Well, we have done online for 2 years and now again hybrid, or now using both worlds together. So it allows us to do something on climate change, but also allowing us to kind of lower our impact on climate by not having to fly people in from all over the world. So we are very grateful that also you as online participants are are here today. Great. There's one thing I would like to say. We are going to use, if you want to participate, if you want to interact, we are going to use, you can use the chat box within the online system that you have. But we will be also using the Mentimeter. And the Mentimeter works as follows. And that's also for the people here physically present in the room. The Mentimeter is on your mobile device. So that's also for the people online. You can use the mobile device and you go to menti.com, 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 and then you type in 52270089. And could I have that slide of the Mentimeter, please? Donc, en ligne, je vous invite à aller sur menti.com, sur votre...
So the speaker does repeat again in English what he just said about Mentimeter and menti.com, menti.com, 52270089. So you simply need to enter this code if you want to access the Mentimeter app.
Vous pouvez appuyer dessus.
And there is a little heart, and you can click on the heart.
We see lots of hearts. I'm still waiting to show it up on to show it up here, but that will come later. So we will be using this tool. Yes, very good. Last thing before I give the floor for the opening words, last thing I would like to say is that this conference is being supported financially, technically by, of course, VVOB, APF, UNICEF, Enable, et aussi avec le soutien tout particulier cette année de l'Institut.
But also with the support of OIF, and we will have the opportunity to welcome them online for the opening with Mona Larossi, who is online with us today. So, but before we give the floor to Mona Larossi, I would like first of all to give the floor to Vivi OB and Sven Holmes and Stefan Pluma, who will introduce the meeting. So if you want to take the floor, gentlemen, feel free to do so.
From the VVOB.
All right. Good afternoon to all of you here present here in Brussels, but also to the many people who are joining us online. Well, this year, the title of Educate's International Conference is, well, the cross impact of climate change and education, a global challenge, with an exclamation mark. And I'm really happy that Educate is, well, once again, breaking boundaries of two sectors. A few years ago, Educate organized a conference on the cross impact of health and education. And today and tomorrow, we'll focus on the cross impact of climate change and education. And I think this is extremely important, because it's only by escaping the silos of expertise that we together can really contribute to solutions for global challenges of our time. And it's quite clear that climate change is definitely one of the global challenges we are facing today. I'm pretty sure I don't have to convince this audience about that. And the same applies for the cross impact of climate change on education. And just a few examples, because the effects of climate change on education are devastating. It's a really big impact on learners. Floods result in school closures. Droughts lead to crop failures, income losses, and an increasing number of early dropouts. And also, in many cases, in the aftermath of a natural disaster, schools are used as shelter places, again, de facto making learning impossible. So yes, I think it's fair to say that climate change has an extremely big impact on education. And the thing that makes it even worse is that, well, this devastating impact is not equally spread across the world. So in many cases, those countries that are already facing an education crisis are, well, the same countries that are hit the hardest by the effects of climate change. And as a result of that, aggravating the existing education crisis. So we could say that it's inequality at its best. But as much as climate change has a negative impact on education, education has a huge potential to be part of solutions for climate change. And I'm really stressing the word potential, because education doesn't have a positive impact by default. It never has. Education can confirm, or even worse, can strengthen existing practices that have negative impact on global challenges like, for instance, poverty, inequality, gender inequality, but also climate change. And unfortunately, in many cases, it still does. So I think it's really important that the education gets its act together and becomes really transformational. It's only by doing that that education can become a part of the solution. And we as education actors here in this venue, also online, we have a role to play. We need to support ministries of education, teachers, school leaders, and all people involved in education system to ensure that education can become a part of the solution. So for today and tomorrow, I invite you, I encourage you to really listen to each other, to discuss and to learn from each other, to ensure that once we go home, that we can really be part of the fact that education can become transformational. So I think we can do that, and I would also say with an exclamation mark. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sven Roms, Director General of the VVOB, stressing the potential of education in giving us solutions. Stéphane Plumet, Directeur Général de l'APF. Je vous laisse la parole pour le mot d'ouverture.
Merci beaucoup. Madame la directrice de l'expertise sectorielle et thématique d'Enabel.
Well, Mrs. the Director in charge of expertise within Enabel, dear Sven, dear Mrs. Lahoussi, ladies and gentlemen, in your respective responsibilities, I would like to thank you for attending this meeting this afternoon. You probably know that we had to go through a very long period of lockdown, and now we have finally the opportunity to meet again. And the environmental transition we do experience, because I should not use the term crisis, because if we talk about a crisis, we mean that we have to go back to the initial situation. But here we are going through a transition. That's really a matter of transition, because we don't want to go back to the previous situation. We need a genuine change. And the environmental transition we are experiencing is, of course, meant to help us to look for solutions. And we need to look for solutions all together, because we want to see to it that we can move forward in dignity, with happiness and with a fair share in terms of happiness and wealth distribution. So we do hope indeed, or we are convinced rather, that in fact that solutions might emerge, provided of course we do all work together. And it is true that teachers and students are the stepstones of this whole procedure, because they are a source of hope. And the same does apply to their communities, or to the communities where those teachers and students live, because education is usually conveyed via the communities or through the communities and their families. Children do learn through what they see, through what they feel, through observing the adults in their environment, and through observing their parents. Of course, all children do want to do exactly what daddy or mommy does, or the neighbor does, or the craftsman in the street or in the neighborhood. So they want indeed to repeat and copy their behavior. So if we do manage to do this at school, we also need to pay attention to what we could promote through the families and the communities, with a view to secure a very good involvement of children, because those children are future adults, and they might help us, of course, to solve environmental issues and problems. So we need to talk about climate in classrooms, and that's a starting point. That's something quite basic, but of course we need to move a step forward and do the same within the families and the communities, and we need to do that in an articulated way, if I may say so. It is true that educational curriculum need to focus on climate and environmental objective, and it is related to SDG 4.7, related to sustainable development. And if we were to do that, all the elements which are supposed to favor climate change should focus on awareness raising, education, and individual skills, as well as institutional skills. with a view to adjust to the climate change and to mitigate the impact of climate change. So what I've done is a kind of rough summary of the target 5.3 of SDGs. And by the way, SDGs do encourage us to give a systemic answer to the cross impact of climate change and the role played by education. And when I'm talking about impact, I'm talking both about positive and negative impacts. APFA has supported over the last 10 years the government of Burkina Faso with a view to develop a series of programs related to the Sahara Desert and reforestation. Of course, it's not a matter of reforestation alone with a view to stop the development of the desert, but the purpose of all that is to make it possible for people to live in a restored environment with good living resources, while stopping at the same time desertification issues. So APFA and the partners did understand indeed that environmental education was the backbone of this type of initiative, and it was really critical, pivotal for the success of the whole procedure. And the general strategy, developed in Burkina Faso is based on education and environmental issues. So we have different pillars, and the objective at the end of the day is to set up an environmental education program and to train all the stakeholders with a view to fight against desertification, decline in terms of the use of the land, and the improvement, enhancement of the environment as a whole. So that's roughly speaking what we are supposed to talk today and tomorrow. But we have trained 101 services and departments with a view to explain what is at stake or the challenges at stake regarding environmental issues. We have channeled and broadcasted, a series of messages through the radio, and we have drafted comics, for example, comic strips or cartoons and things of the kind meant for schools. So that's roughly speaking what we did with a view to fight climate change. And in our theory of change, we decided to include an educational dimension because we targeted schools and children and learners, but at the same time we decided to involve their parents and the communities, and we do believe that this type of initiative could be disseminated in all similar projects or initiatives. And before concluding my speech, I would like to thank OIF, the French-speaking Institute for Training and Education, because you are a partner, a long-time partner of APFA. And this partnership is a very good example of complementarity from an operational point of view, because we have multilateral and bilateral actions, and we are a very good, we have a very good partnership in both fields. The multilateral partnerships are usually built together on the basis of the needs expressed and voiced by the different stakeholders and partners. So it is not based on fantasies or foreign objectives or interest indeed. So I would like to conclude my speech by wishing you a fruitful session, a very inspiring debate and a fruitful discussion. So I hope you will really enjoy this International Educate Day. Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you so much indeed for having underlined the link between education, climate change, and development, because that's precisely the topics we are supposed to tackle today. And I forgot to mention it at the very beginning. I'm sorry for my mistake, but the ministry, the Belgian minister, of Belgian cooperation, Mrs. Kitty, was supposed to be here, was supposed to make a speech, the opening speech, but she is unfortunately sick and is not in a position, unfortunately, to deliver her speech today. So we are going to give the floor without further ado to Mona Laroussi, who is the person in charge of training and education for OIF. I would prefer you to tell I'm the director. Well, thank you.
J'ai dit, je préfère être directrice que directeur, mais bon.
I'd rather be a female director than a male director. Well, we are all together. And as they say, on my behind and on the name of EFF, I would like to thank you for giving me the floor today. Last month in September, I took part in the summit called Transforming Education, which is positioned after the crisis that you all mentioned, the global education crisis after the pandemic mostly. This crisis also revealed large disparities, not only between countries, but also within countries and between groups of individuals. Before the COVID pandemic, a quarter of a billion children did not go to school, and half children when well, finished school without having the basic literacy. 24% have now an increased risk of school dropouts. And you know that it's always girls and women that are more at risk. And the percentage of children that cannot neither read nor write nor understand the basic story at 7 years old reached 90%. The international community was made aware of the risk in order to take the right measures. Let me now come back on climate and sustainable development and education. This crisis may be visible for most, but the consequences will be very bad for the future generation. The topics are about inclusive and fair schools. And I would like to add that children who were mentioned by both directors, children who live in very high-risk zone, risk of droughts or floodings. They can be submitted to climate issues. They cannot be in classroom. Beyond these children, what we can see is also some food and security because of climate change. So these children are in such food insecurity, they cannot go to school. Second issue, the learning of life skills and sustainable development. Then there is the value of teachers' careers, e-learnings, and education financing. How can we meet these needs? How can we integrate all these topics, everything that is about sustainable development in our program? In our programs, we work with countries in structuring projects with a systemic approach that has an impact on education, employment, inclusion, and professional insertion. We work a lot with digital innovation, and this is all based in the respect of environment and constraints related to climate change. These actions are the results of the action between EFAF and national structures, and they can generate a positive change with co-construction and planned activities, a transfer of skills to national experts, a better involvement of national players at all levels, and a monitoring at a national and international level. Let me just present our program and see how our program can go in both ways. The IFADEM initiative that we've been financing for a few years now were adopted depending on the needs of each and every country. So this program is now in 16 countries, 6,000 teachers were trained with 200 hours. School directors, as you know, they are right away as directors, so they have to be trained when it comes to all kind of human resources and management, and we were supported. The topics are about the classroom, an educational fact sheet, evaluation, but also what about recycling products? What can we do with sheets of paper that are not useful anymore? How can plastic be used? And so on. It's also a question of preventing dangers related to climate change. These booklets are only given if need be, but they are available on our website. When it comes to the program called Elan, we work on the national momentum, which is the translation of Elan. And what we can say is that 8 children out of 10 in Africa live in a semi-urban place. So the children of these villages can only hear the language of their mother. And when they go to school, they suddenly learn French. So this is a program that works with national languages. In that program, we train 4,000 teachers in 1,100 schools, bilingual school. We developed some educational tools, but we also made sure that some sustainable development was included in the national language because it is much more understandable by by local people. We also have a program aiming at improving the offer of professional vocational training. There, we work with blue and green businesses. In the light of the report of the African Development Bank that says that Africa is the least resilient continent when it comes to climate change. I just wanted to mention it. In sustainable development, you have SDG 5 and 7, where you have women empowerment. And there we have educational portal with all the educational material in order to empower women and to keep women and girls as long as possible in the classroom, without, of course, forgetting the women entrepreneurship, women empowerment, and so on. This is very quickly what we have been doing. The question is to know how education can help fighting against climate change and building capacities. We are convinced that education is the solution for a sustainable future for our children. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mona Laroussi, Director of IFEF. Thank you for showing us how urgent and how relevant the topics we will be discussing about today and tomorrow are. Let me remind to those online and on-site that we are using Mentimeter, menti.com. Please go to menti.com on your smartphone or on any other device that you may have at your disposal. And the code is 52270091. Can you please join us? We can see where you are coming from. Can you please tell us where you are coming from? So it's 52270089. So we have people from Indonesia, Rwanda, Belgium, Senegal, Vietnam. I'm sure there are more than that. Please go to Mentimeter with the code 52270089. France, we can see France. Belgium in 3 languages, only German is missing for covering all the national languages of Belgium. So you can see the countries: Palestine, West Bank, people from many different places. Next question. What is your role either in education or in climate change? There are several potential roles. You can see them here. You can be a teacher, you can be a student, and you can be several things. You can give several answers. You can have several possibilities there because we never have only one role as a person. So please write them down. Stéphane, a question. When we see the audience that we have now, do you have any special comment to make when you see our audience today? Or Sven?
No, I think it's nice to see that we have some people joining this conference from different parts, both from let's say civil society and government, which I think is really important, because if we look at education from a rights-based perspective, for instance, quality education is the responsibility of government. So it's very good that we have representatives from government here, but as civil society, we also have a role to play to, well, on the one hand, to support governments so that they can take up their responsibility in a better way, but also to create awareness about the importance of education and to involve also families, etc. So I think
so all these to support teachers
yes,
and
indeed.
students.
Yes, indeed. I think it's a joint endeavor to, if we really want to improve the quality of education. We can't do it, as I said in the beginning, we can't do it in silos. We have to work together.
Last question before we move on, which is, what question would you like to get answered during the conference? Now, what question would you like to get answered during those 2 days that you are here? Whether you just follow 1 or 2 sessions or whether you follow everything, what would you like to get answered during the conference? And this usually takes indeed a little bit more time because you have to type like questions are coming in. How can we break down silos? How can education sector top into the climate financing? What makes education transformational and how can we contribute to that? What are the strategies to articulate climate programs? And can you scroll the lid upwards so that we can see what's there? Yes, that's it. How will we teach the adults of today and how will we reach the people that really have an impact? Now you can read all those questions that are that we have here, and with that, this was the opening of the session. I would like to thank Sven Rooms, Stéphane Pluma, and Mona Laroussi. Mona, vous êtes encore avec nous? Non. En tout cas, on ne l'entend pas ici.
Oui, mon micro
Un
était
grand
fermé.
applaudissement and warm applause for